And sometimes you pick up the phone and you're like, oh, I don't have time for this. And then you kind of get present and realize this woman's asking for help. And so you dive in with her. And I was talking through it with her and I said, well, okay, let's slow down a little bit. The doctor wants you to get these nutrients. And the easiest way to get these nutrients, or the most common way, is to take them through a synthetic supplement. And those synthetic supplements are hard to absorb. The gel capsule or the tablet, it's going to be tough on the digestion. And so they're telling you to get a chewable because it's more absorbable. All right, there's some things I don't disagree with, but let's go further. One of the best multivitamins you can take is Spirulina Chlorella. Everyone listening is like, oh no, here we go again. But Spirulina Chlorella is chewable. You know, it's a powder that they press into a tablet to swallow it, but it is chewable. I don't recommend chewing it. But the difference between the powder and the tablet is that it's pressurized. And so the absorbability is going to be exactly the same. And so this question and this thought process got me to realize that this woman is going to go down this path and really not get the results. She's not going to get the relief. They're going to just cover this up at every corner. And that's why I had you take a gummy today. It's the fastest growing. You can call it a nutraceutical, but they call it actually a candyceutical. It's going to outpace tablets, supplements, superfoods because of the ease and the convenience, the taste, and the amazing marketing. Welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. It's myself, Matt Johnson, and my partner in crime, the big fella, my father, Chris Johnson. A couple things, announcements. It's November. Can't believe it's November, but we have a couple sales coming this month. Obviously, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Small Business Saturday. We like to think of November as our promotion month. But if you're on our email, if you're on our text, SMS, look for those deals, and they're going to begin this week. And today we're going to kind of continue this conversation around superfoods and going closer to the source, but I'm going to come from a different angle today based on a real live phone call I had yesterday. And we're going to title this Profit or Results, or How Do You Have Profit and Results? And we're going to give you a little peek behind the curtain when it comes to on-target living, because we've been in business as on-target living since 2006. Dad, you've been doing this how long?
Oh, gosh. You're
3 weeks?
About 38 years.
40 years. So I'm 37. He's been doing this for 40 years. And, you know, as we're going into 2024, the world of information, nutrition, exercise, social media, influence, supplementation, the amount of noise is really incredible. And as humans, I think we strive to have information. I think we're addicted to information. It's an information economy. And we used to say, you know, people are starving for this information. You say that a lot. We're starving for this information. I think we're starving for information. I think what we're starving for is we're starving for results, for change. But I think sometimes that information can get in the way because our mind wants to go to the easiest, the quickest, the trendiest, the thing we can that seems mysterious. And that's what we're chat about today. And so to start the podcast, I gave you a gummy over there. And so this is a gummy I got at a trade show, and it's a cold and flu support. This is a strawberry lemon flavor. I just want you to, on camera, I want you to consume this gummy. We'll talk about what it tastes like.
I told you I didn't want to consume this.
He didn't want to take it, but he's going to take it. Tastes like a gummy. Tastes pretty good. Let's just say...
Tastes fake.
It tastes fake. Well, it is fake. So we're going to get into this in a second, but let me read what we just consumed. Soluble tapioca fiber, allulose, water, erythritol, xylitol, pectane, monk fruit, citric acid, sodium citrate, vegetable juice color, stevia, rice flour, sunflower oil. And it's a supplement for cold and flu because it has 40 milligrams of ascorbic acid, which is synthetic vitamin C, and zinc citrate, which is synthetic zinc, 3 milligrams. And so those are the supplements in the gummy. So welcome back to the podcast. How was your first gummy experience?
Wait a minute. Let's stop for a second. So they're promoting that as a flu and cold?
Yeah, it's titled Cold Relief, Natural Cold and Flu
what's in
Support.
there?
Well, there's a couple asterisks next to the flu support. These statements haven't been evaluated.
I just have to laugh. I'm like, what's in there to help support?
Well, it's vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, sugar. It's sugar-free.
A cardboard piece of cardboard. It's vitamin C and zinc, and it's all synthetic.
Yeah, I probably
doesn't
should have
really-
come on today and said you're going to get pretty fired up with this topic because I'm
Oh
going
my
to get you.
gosh, if you looked at the ingredients, everybody would realize that's just garbage. Anyway, I'm sorry, I regressed there, but
All right,
that's
so
the stuff
this
that
is
drives me
where
crazy.
this podcast came to fruition this week. I get a phone call yesterday from this nice lady. She's a longtime follower, does the Superfoods. Probably read your oldest book. She sounded like she was 60, 70 years old. She's calling, and her first question was, "Do you have any chewable multivitamins?" And her tone of her voice sounded like potentially maybe she's under the weather or coming off of surgery. She sounded a little bit weak, but as you got to talk, she's just a little bit older. And she was actually calling for her daughter. Her daughter just got released from the University of Michigan for 1 week, and they diagnosed her with Crohn's disease. A week before that, she was at the hospital here in East Lansing, Spiro Hospital. Didn't know what was wrong with her. Gave her steroids, morphine, painkillers. A couple days, she felt better, and off she went. It persisted, and so she went to Michigan, and they diagnosed her with Crohn's. As she was leaving, 90% of her intestines were inflamed. That's how they can see or diagnose the Crohn's. They say to her, you need to consume multivitamins, but you need to get them in a chewable source because they're more absorbable. So I'm giving you the backstory. She's explaining this, and it was later in the day. I had plenty of work to do. I picked up the phone. And sometimes you pick up the phone and you're like, I don't have time for this. And then you kind of get present and realize this woman's asking for help. And so you dive in with her. And I was talking through it with her, and I said, well, okay, let's slow down a little bit. The doctor wants you to get these nutrients. And the easiest way to get these nutrients, or the most common way, is to take them through a synthetic supplement. And those synthetic supplements are hard to absorb. The gel capsule or the tablet, it's going to be tough on the digestion. And so they're telling you to get a chewable because it's more absorbable. All right, there's some things I don't disagree with, but let's go further. One of the best multivitamins you can take is Spirulina Chlorella. Everyone listening is like, oh no, here we go again. But Spirulina Chlorella is chewable. It's a powder that they press into a tablet to swallow it, but it is chewable. I don't recommend chewing it. But the difference between the powder and the tablet is that it's pressurized. And so the absorbability is going to be exactly the same. And so this question and this thought process got me to realize that this woman is going to go down this path and really not get the results. She's not going to get the relief. They're going to just cover this up at every corner. And that's why I had you take a gummy today. It's the fastest growing, you can call it a nutraceutical, but they call it actually a candyceutical. It's going to outpace tablets, supplements, superfoods because of the ease and the convenience, the taste, and the amazing marketing. So that's my soapbox today. That's why we're talking about this. I told the woman, have her call me. If she's willing to do the work, the first thing I would do is I'd start to eat real food. I'd chew food. I wouldn't chew a supplement.
If you begin with gut health, it always begins with the garden. So if you're going to put healthy things in the garden, That's what's going to make the garbage get
And
better.
that gut begins with chewing. I mean, we want you to chew everything.
Mm-hmm. And so most of your, at the beginning, your amylase enzymes are in the mouth. So when you start chewing, you're already starting the breakdown process.
Or think of saliva when you're hungry. The
Yeah.
saliva's created. That's got a bunch of things in it.
So again, it's not what we put in the body. We said this many, many times. It's what the body can break down and absorb. And so when you think about Spirulina Chlorella, number one, Spirulina is a bacteria and Chlorella is a food. All right, so what does it do? Well, it has multiple, so now you can call it multi, and it has vitamins and minerals and all sorts of things in there. But at the bottom line, it's really good for your gut health because that's what it does. It's a good, healthy bacteria.
Binds to toxins,
It's a natural
eliminates.
detoxifier, eliminator, but it's really good for the gut. So, but again, Hadley stayed overnight this weekend, your daughter Hadley, and the first thing I gave her on Sunday morning was I put wheatgrass ice cubes in a cup, and then I let them get softer, and then I cut them up. I chopped them up a little bit. And Hadley loves wheatgrass, but it's nothing better for Hadley's gut, and she likes it. She kept asking me, can I have more? I go, no, 2 ice cubes is enough. And then we went to the cod liver oil, and you kind of see how this starts to roll. And then she had a smoothie, and then I made my world-famous pancakes, and, she's ready to go. But why do we get so far away? I get it, the ease, convenience. I mean, I was doing the Heal the Healer conference a couple weeks ago, and one of the doctors comes up to me and said to me, such and such, and, he's doing, our cod liver oil. I'm like, well, how much are you taking? He goes, well, I'm taking 4 tablespoons a day. I'm like, well, no, you're not. And then the next thing you know, he's not taking our cod liver oil. He's taking synthetic version and blah, blah, blah. But in his mind, he was...
And he's taking a tab. He's taking a capsule.
He's taking a capsule, yeah. And it's, anyway, so... That's the challenge. It's easy.
How do we get here?
Yeah.
So when you got in the business, what supplements were on the market that you were, as a bodybuilder, part of it? Maybe you were exposed to some of these things, but the average person in 1985,
everybody took a multivitamin.
What kind?
1 a day.
1 a day.
1 a day.
Big.
Yeah, it was in a red container. Everybody's doing 1 a day. Like you could see your doctor, and the doctor would say, I remember my parents had the 1 a day multivitamin.
1,000 different nutrients.
It had everything in there. You name it, it had it in there. So again, back to that. So then it was 1 a day, and then today it's like Centrum, Silver, and the list goes on and on. The other thing that many people were taking and that were working out was amino acids. And so when I my first bodybuilding contest, I had a whole tray of different types of branched chain amino acids.
You don't even know what you're putting in your
I
body.
didn't know I do it. Yeah, just follow the path. So, but the big one was the 1 a day. Almost everybody was doing that. It was major marketing.
So in 40 years, we haven't changed. It's still the same. I'm gonna say it. It's still the same garbage, just regurgitated.
Yeah, and then
here's. I did a little research. The definition of food are things you eat or drink to maintain life and growth. Food. A supplement contains a dietary ingredient. That's where we should just already realize. Kristen says this. We don't eat ingredients. We eat food. And when you eat food, you're going to get nutrients. Nutrients and ingredients are not the same thing. The problem right now is when you say go take a multivitamin, it makes a ton of sense. Because a supplement is trying to supplement for something. You're missing these nutrients. Well, what you're missing, though, is food, because the true definition of food is to eat or drink to maintain life and growth. So there's a lot of things that we're putting in our body that we think are food. It isn't food.
Well, and back to the basic of when you eat food, you cover lots of ground. I don't have to worry about taking a B vitamin or a vitamin C that you just talked about, or
Zinc.
vitamin D3, or any of these, if I'm eating these real foods.
Variety of foods.
So the first thing I always work with my clients on, number one, Nutrition 101, what nutrient are you missing? And most people have no idea. But I'll just say, what food groups are you missing? That's where we begin. And they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. When you cut out grains, such as real oats, I'm not talking about the garbage oats or teff or amaranth, you cover all this ground. Plus you have all this fiber. So now you're missing fiber. Now I'm taking a Metamucil or some type of fiber supplement. And then over here, do you eat any kind of fruit, any kind of citrus, any type of fruit, lemons, oranges, bananas, apples? If you're doing that, then you're covered over here. So that's the challenge. Like, when people say, how do you know what I'm missing? I don't need to test you. I don't need to have you have
Well, I think
9,000
that's where
tests.
the candy pseudocycles are coming. A lot of these testing companies, and I like a lot of these testing
Sure.
companies, but what you see follow the test is the supplement.
Oh,
And
correct.
everything's going to be AI driven. Okay, this person's testing for this low level
Right.
here, and they're going to spit out this information.
Here comes magnesium.
Here's this gummy. Here's this Calm.
Right.
Here's this creatine. Here's these B vitamin complexes because of energy. Here's the collagen. And I was at this expo, and I went there for education, meet a couple people. And a lot of people asked me, how'd the expo go? It was kind of depressing. A bunch of junk. And I was there on a couple things. I was looking for some food. Food didn't exist. It was ingredients. And it was an ingredient conference, but you think ingredients would be food. And so a couple of the booths that were selling food, like chia seeds and dates and these commodities, it's just a commodity. But the people making the money are making these things that you just had, this gummy. Can take anything you want. They got this, proprietary formula, publicly traded company, and they can turn it into any type of gummy you want.
The food scientists, they're going to say, put these things in it and make it taste good. And the profitability, first book.
Because all they're looking at is ingredients.
Yeah, the first book I read back in the 1970s was Jim Hightower's Eat Your Heart Out. And it was all about processed food and profitability. If you took a tomato, there's no profit in tomato, but you better convert it into ketchup, salsa, you name it. It's no different in the world today. All the profits in that.
So that's what I wanted to give some transparency. We are a for-profit business, and to give you a little bit behind the scenes, we do sell products that make a profit, but we consider them what we think are essential, missing superfoods that provide like you said, the abundance of nutrients that what people are missing. And the challenge with what we do is it requires education. Nobody wakes up and says, oh, I can't wait to take Spirulina Chlorella until they're educated why, what it's doing, and what results.
Or the cod liver oil.
Or the cod liver oil. Or
wheatgrass.
Making a smoothie with smoothie blend and the seeds versus the protein powder. But what I want to share with the listeners, we've been approached multiple times. I remember, I think you were speaking, guy was in the audience, or maybe I was speaking. Who knows? Things blur together. But he owned a supplement company, $100 million supplement company. He said, I could make you guys a protein powder in a second. And I said, but we don't believe in a protein powder. But you could sell it. You're right. And that's where I want to give the listeners a little bit of the challenge with this space is as it gets noisier and we crave information and we want it quicker, more attractive, more entertaining, we're going to find that these companies are going to start popping up and they're going to tell you all the amazing, great things. They're going to have the scientists and the influencer promoting it and touting it. What we have to back up is the definition of food is what we eat or drink to maintain life and growth. And it's actually pretty simple. And when we start getting to these things where we start to take a gummy for everything, think about CBD and THC. I mean, that's the number one vehicle for those nutrients because all you do is chew it and it tastes pretty good and away you can go.
Well, and I think if you go back in time, this message we'll constantly try to evolve, learning and growing and things like that, but we'll always keep coming back to the source. We're not going to get away from that because we're trying to eat food. All the food that we basically sell rots. Because if it doesn't rot, then it's not a live food. So that's the big difference. So when you leave foods out, like if you left Spirulina Chlorella out or wheatgrass out or cod liver oil out, it starts to turn rancid because it's a live food. And that's the big, our animals are not confused about what to eat. Like if I give Floyd something to eat, it better be a real food or he's not eating it. And as human beings, we're so confused today about what to eat, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, and you're talking before we got on about some of these. So we talk about gummies, candy pseudocycles, the multivitamins, and there might be a time or place, but the truth is, if you can go close to the source, and you're actually willing to make the change, that's the difference. If all you want to do is pop, not think about it, probably gummy is going to be where you end. But if you do want the best thing for you, closer to the source. But you're talking about some of, I would say, let's just call the gummy the junior high. But once you get into high school and college, now there are these gummies, a statin, Ozempic, Jardiance, some of these pharmaceuticals. And no, they're not gummies. No, they're not geared towards kids necessarily, but they're the same mindset. Talk about what you were telling me before we got on about how a statin is like the worst of all gummies.
Well, I was speaking in Cincinnati last week, and the guy in the audience asked me, what's my take on statin medications? So I said, well, let's stop. And the whole audience, I think, was very interested because we kind of got in that path during the Q&A. And so I just said, step back for a second. What is cholesterol? Don't be afraid of it. I even wrote a blog called Don't Be Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, why it's essential for brain health and hormones. The list goes on. So number one is, what is cholesterol? Why it's so important. Number two is understanding what your risk is. Homocysteine, CRP, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, so now let's step back and say, okay, imagine if you had an opportunity to change your cholesterol profile to make your body completely healthy, not just targeting your cholesterol. I said, how many of you in this audience would be interested in taking that path? And everybody raised their hand. I said, but this path is a lot harder. You're going to have to do maybe some flax seeds. You're going to change how you eat. You're going to maybe do the cod liver oil. You're going to do all these things, right? So I said, I've never had anybody not get off of cholesterol medication my entire career if they're willing to change these lifestyles. Now, again, sometimes to support the medical world, not everybody sitting in that chair is going to want to change their lifestyle. So
Sure.
Hence, here comes the statin med that has multiple side effects. But again, you got to look at the two evils here. What's better? So that's the challenge. And now that turns, in my opinion, into if I have blood pressure, I'm going to take the gummy. So not saying medications can't fit a role, but to me now it's the easiest path of taking the next step. In reality is, what if you had an opportunity? I was just listening to the TED Hour on, it's called Body Electric, and it talked about when the people take micro breaks during the day, their blood pressure comes back to normal, their glucose levels start to improve drastically, their anxiety starts to disappear, and energy improves, but just by taking multiple breaks a day. So again, we have this at our fingertips, but it's going to take a lot more effort.
Yeah, you have to get a different result requires changing of behavior.
If
you're not willing to change the behavior, you can mask it with, we're talking right now in this sense of a statin is a gummy mindset. I'm just going to take a gummy as a mindset.
Or a blood pressure or whatever. Not saying that.
Or Ozempic.
Ozempic.
Yeah.
But you think about Ozempic, now people are like, okay, I'm taking Ozempic, but now, they move into a Wegovy, and then that's for weight loss. And I can just take that.
Yeah.
When reality is now we know it's
Hollywood's taking it.
Yeah, Hollywood's taking it. And the mindset is that, hey, I can take that pill and I can kind of.
But here's the key. Once we go further and further down this path, that's where the side effects come in. And so out of any of the supplements or medications, the biggest side effect is a statin. The side effects are crazy.
Well, all of them have an effect.
Yes.
We always talk about side effect. They all have an effect, and people have to wake up and say, if I'm doing that for a period of time, especially some of these new like Ozempic and Wegovy, they're killing the gut. I mean, if you think about it,
paralyzed stomachs.
Yeah, it's paralyzing the stomach. So people don't understand that, but you're going to notice that in 5 years. You're going to see. I talk about this Viax way back in the day. People thought Viax was the best ever inflammation medication, pain med. And then it was taken off the market 2 years later because they realized it was killing people, causing heart attacks and strokes and things like that. So these all have an effect, but people have to step back and say, hey, just like your gummy conversation, is that gummy really? I mean, look at those ingredients you read to me. I didn't want to put that in my mouth.
Well, again, I was at this expo, and so I was going booth to booth, and sometimes you think they're making things up, but I think they're smart people with white papers. And, I was sitting in that presentation I was telling you about with the peptides, and this AI generated computer creates these peptides that they think people are going to benefit from. And then it shows that it's 4 times better at increasing protein and all that kind of things. And, you kind of start to drink the Kool-Aid, and then you step back and say, but you're comparing this to, again, another supplement. You're comparing this to a population that's not doing any activity, and there's no lifestyle. You can't really test lifestyle. It's hard to measure that. And then I stumbled on this booth, and I kind of passed it, and then I went back because I heard them talking, and they were talking about a postbiotic. You know, prebiotic. That's kind of new for folks. Probiotic. People have started to hear that, but I'm not talking 10 years, 15 years. No one was talking about these things. Now we're talking postbiotic. And I said, well, what's a postbiotic? And she said, oh, it's newly discovered 6 months ago, blah, 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 from this special food. It's what the probiotics eat. And I said, but what is it? And she said, it's a plant. Okay, what's it taste like? Doesn't taste very good. And she had the powder there. You can take it in the powder. Thinking, oh, here we go again. And what did she pull out of this cupboard? Well, we got it in a gummy. And this gummy looked like a horse gummy. I mean, it's huge. Because if you think about a pro or prebiotic, for it to really work, it has to be active.
Has to be.
It can't be killed.
Can't kill it.
And so I was talking to a good colleague of ours that, is a partner of ours out there at the show. And he said, these probiotic and prebiotic gummies are selling like hotcakes, but they're not quite sure what the shelf life is of the being active. And that's what we got to get back to. If you don't see the food rot in front of you and you just take it for their word, we're going to have limiting benefits, limiting results. If I bite into an apple, I know that's probably pretty good for me. If I take the number one selling Amazon supplement in the world, apple cider vinegar gummies, I'm just taking their word that there's something in it. And that's where this gets a little bit gray, is everything we do sell, for the most part. I mean, a lot of the seeds and stuff are just commodities. But they're technically categorized as supplements. But what we try to tell people is, yes, they're categorized as supplements, but they're really superfoods. They're as close to the source for the missing nutrients that people have. Mm. And you're not going to have wild cod every day. You're not going to grow your own wheatgrass. You're not going to have an algae farm. And so that's why they tend to be called supplements, but they're food.
Well, and again, way back in the day, we started looking at what are the oldest foods in the world? What are the most powerful foods in the world? The
oldest food in the world is Chlorella.
Yeah. And then you follow that by grass. And then if you look at sea vegetables, and then what most people are missing is omega-3s.
Well, we were reading that book. This is interesting. When you think of gasoline, fuel, has anyone ever asked the question, what's the source? And we were reading that book. It was
slime.
Slime.
Yeah.
The book's called Slime. It's kind of a coin on pond scum, but algae. But gasoline comes from algae. I don't know if it's 10 million years that
it's a long time.
The point is, there's always a source. Gas is not just gas. There's a source of gas. These gummies are not just gummies. There's a source of these things. And as humans, if we can find a closer to the source item, it's usually less expensive, and it's going to be healthier for you.
So right where what you're talking about, in my opinion, is that's the heart of. So, for example, if you said I'm going to take a statin med, and I've had this. I don't try to be that person, but I do become that person sometimes.
Well, you're getting old. You get cranky.
I don't care anymore.
Yeah. He's 66 in a couple weeks.
I ask, what is in that statin? So tell me what it is. Because if you said, hey, tell me what that blood pressure medication, it's a calcium channel blocker. Okay, so I know it's synthetic, but tell me what it is. What is it? Because if you look at a angiotensin drug for blood pressure or a calcium channel blocker, how does it work?
Yeah. You should know anything that it goes in your body if you care.
So next time, if any of you are out there taking a statin med or a blood pressure medication, ask who's ever prescribing it, what is it? Don't tell me what it does. What is it?
What is it?
What is it? And you're going to go, I don't know what it is, but can you imagine putting something in your body day in and day out? You have no idea what it is. So that's the question sometimes I have with my clients. They're like, tell me what it is. I don't want to know what it does. I know what it does. Tell me what it is. Because if you know what it is, then you could find another thing that does that, maybe like if you think of a COX-2 inhibitor, I always talk about this. If you looked at omega-3 fats are COX-2 inhibitors. That's part of what they are. That's what lowers inflammation. So if you said, okay, I'm taking that medication, and that medication is a COX-2 inhibitor, it's much more powerful, but it's a synthetic form of COX-2 inhibitor. So that's what I always want to know. Tell me
everything that is created
what it is.
Supplement, pharmaceutical, there's something in nature that created this, at least this idea. It's like Velcro. Man-made, great thing. But it was designed off something in nature. So they saw the ways that these fibers in nature were binding, and then they man-made it, or rubber, or anything.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with food. Unfortunately, we're not machines. We're not companies. We're humans. And so I think that's where we get it kind of confused, is the body does some pretty magical things. Most things explainable, some things not explainable. And when you start to try to think, well, if someone's just deficient in zinc, that's why they're getting sick. That's where we're going to continue to put on the Band-Aid, and we're going to continue to go.
All right, so again, if you said, hey, I'm deficient in whatever, zinc, then you, like in the Rest, Eat, Move book, I have all these lists of foods high in iodine, foods high in magnesium. The list goes on, calcium foods, but they're foods. So if you take any of them, what you notice, they all cross over. Like when you look at the food target, there's foods in the carbohydrate. All carbohydrates, have some fat or protein except for fruits. So if you eat a nut's going to have protein, nut's going to have fat, nut's going to have selenium, nut's going to have zinc. You can see why I don't have to do all this stuff now. So, but if I'm not eating nuts, or I'm not eating ancient grains, or I don't eat fruit, you can start seeing now we're starting to miss nutrients, and we start trying to fill the holes.
And medicine is really in isolation, and in many ways that can be good. But when it comes to nutrition and feeling your best, there's a lot of people out there that are really starting to realize that you don't really go to medicine to feel your best. You go to medicine to survive, to fix something. And when you do nutrition in isolation, say I need zinc or I need multivitamin, you're going to have 15 things in your cupboard that are man-made, that are hard to absorb, that are going to cost you a lot more money than just getting back to figuring out what's the closest source.
And I think when you think of dis-ease, we have to step back and say, okay, where's my foundation here? What do I do? Your podcast last week on the food police is kind of what you're discussing today is like, you don't have to beat people up. The goal is, how do you build some of these easy habits, and that you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to take everything. But if you start thinking a little bit differently, that's the whole gist of this podcast, is you're thinking differently. You're not thinking about medications. You might look at medications now as gummies, or you might look at these gummies that you're talking about for gut health or cold and flu or whatever it might be. But really, seriously, if I'm going to try to add more, what's in there? Zinc,
vitamin C,
acid,
and a bunch of artificial fake things.
If you said, okay, take that for example. If you eat an orange and a couple of Brazil nuts, you got selenium, zinc, vitamin C. How much is a half an orange? And it's covering so many other things on top of it.
This is a whole different podcast. One of the concerns is, if we can continue to consume these, an orange and Brazil nuts will be more expensive. And that's where, I think we got to get our head on straight in when it comes to nutrition, is this should never be less money than an orange or Brazil nuts. But when it is, it's because demand is low. They're producing so much of this, or maybe they're taking the ingredients in some of these real foods and they're isolating them and extracting them. And so,
well, when I worked at Frito-Lay, when we sell a Dorito, the bag costs more than the chips, and people got to get away. Like, What? The bag costs more than the chips.
Yeah, and if you try to make a Dorito, you'd spend $50 on ingredients.
So if you think about all that stuff, and one of the most profitable areas in the entire health in any grocery store is the snack food area. I mean, we'd sell a bag of Doritos for $5. I mean, the cost on that's nothing. So it's no different than that. That's why this is going to continue to roll, because there's so much profit in that. If you looked at Spirulina, Chlorella, I mean, there's nothing cheaper. There's not a lot of profit there. There's not a lot of profit in potatoes or tomatoes or oranges or apples. The profit's in this, and this is where it's going.
The profit's going to be in the collagen, the peptides, the creatine, the protein powder, the multivitamin, the gummies. And again, that's why we wanted to have this podcast. Woman calls, daughter's in severe pain, has a, I'm going to say it a disease, but I would say a misalignment of her lifestyle that I think is fixable. I've worked with many people that have had Crohn's disease, and it is improvable. But you got to do some hard work because it didn't just happen.
You got to go back to, again, from the beginning.
What's in the garden?
What's in the garden? How did that begin? And if it began, then you can go back because the body wants to heal and self-correct. Not saying food, as you said last week, food is love, 80-20 rule, all that stuff. But the goal is to say food is social, food is love, but food is medicine and information in the human body, and it doesn't come in a gummy.
So as we wrap up, a couple reminders. This month, November, we're running a lot of promotions. Look for those. We're going to release them as they come. The first one is going to be a signed autographed book from you, Rest, Eat, Move, discounted, target to table, autographed by me. If you combination, we're pretty much giving them away at the cost. I know a lot of you have them already, but give them away as gifts. I think the best gift you can give is
to what you're talking about. This too is we don't ask a whole lot, but if you really like this podcast, share it with others, and share what the lifestyle is, because we're happy to help you. And if you have any questions, I mean, we receive them every day. But like you said yesterday, I sent you an email this morning. We will get on the phone with you. We'll talk to you. We're happy to help you. We're on a mission. So again, we appreciate your support and the love and all the stuff that comes with that. But just to let you know, if you do have any questions, we're always here to help you. And if you like this, what we're sharing, our content, share it with others.
And the takeaway today is, remember this: we are a for-profit business. The more profit we have, the more resources we have to make change. But one of the things you can rely on us is we're going to have the integrity of asking the question, but what's it for? And so, we're working on a potential new formulation for our food bar. And the only way that we're going to pull the trigger on that isn't about how much money we can make. It's can we make it healthier and at the same time taste good? It's not about can we make it taste good and how much profit is it? And that's the thing with supplements, and what we're seeing the trends go is, what's the clickbait? What's easy to sell? We got to step back and ask ourselves, what are the results we want first? From there, understand there's going to be some hard things we got to do. Hard isn't bad. And then how do we make it as simple and one step at a time as possible? And so we'll see you again next time. Continue to consume superfoods and ask the question if you're confused, what's the source? We'll see you again next time.